organizations, great, amazing organizations, are spending insane sums of money to make barbecues and dinners for people to come to raise more money. And that's just the culture that we created. And wouldn't it be an amazing thing if that organization that is using the money for incredible things didn't have to spend $500,000 to raise $3 million? What's the medicine to get away from that? How do we break that down?
See, I'm very much now involved in something called social change. Social change never comes from the top. I just had we had a meeting, like a thought group on social change. But social change is very important. That's a question. But you never change from the top. Change is always grassroots, from the bottom, imperceptibly. A stalker that spends all that money to create, do I respect such a stalker? Probably not.
Hey, Nachi Gordon here, and you're listening to the Meaningful People podcast. Got an amazing episode for you. You saw that trailer? Oh boy, it gets real. We discuss a lot about Jewish finances, but are we spending too much? Is this sustainable for the future of our kids? Is it possible to continue on this way? Plus a lot more in this episode with Ari Bergman, who is a gem of a human being. You don't know him? That's fine. Some people do, some people don't. But listen to this episode. You're going to love every single second. This episode is sponsored by my friend Isaac Newman, the Zechron Nishmas, his mother, Chama Perel Malkalei Bas Aryeh Leib, the schus, the everything derived from this episode should be a schus for your mother, Isaac. Neshama Shavan Aliyah. A big thank you to our friends at Kolel Chabad. Cha-ching! You heard that noise? Yes. Because you just gave tzedakah on their Pushka app. Pushka.cc/meaningful. That is pushka.cc/meaningful. Hit the link in the show notes in the description of this episode. Download the app. Before every single episode I record, I give tzedakah on the Pushka app. You know, I was once by an Album Free concert, and he said before every single concert, he puts a couple bucks in the tzedakah box, as the Rebbe told him to do so, for hatzlacha, to be matzliach. And you should do the same before you do everything. Every single day you wake up, you put dollars into that Pushka, and that's something you can do on your phone now with the Pushka app. So go check that out. A big thank you to them. And this episode is also sponsored by my friends at Town Appliance. The days of having an appliance company that you can reach out to on WhatsApp are here because you are in touch with Town Appliance. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur coming up, Sukkot, the family's coming over, and you want to make sure that everything is clicking on all cylinders. Everyone's getting along, right? The family dynamics. But how about the appliance dynamics? How about those appliances in your home? Are they working? How about you get ahead of the game and say, you know what? It's time for a new fridge. It's time for a new oven. It's time for a new dishwasher. Maybe you're starting a new construction, a new house, and you need appliances. Look no further than Town Appliance. Head to townappliance.com. That's townappliance.com. Or go ahead and message them on WhatsApp at the link in the show notes of this episode. Check out those show notes. There's a lot of goodies there for you. But until then, enjoy this episode. You are listening to the Meaningful People podcast.
The podcast featuring our nation's most impactful, influential,
and meaningful people.
Well, thank you so much for coming into the studio today. We were just remarking how it's an interesting day and time with the markets doing what they're doing and how involved you are in the financial world. And I think part of what we want to do today is sort of synthesize the worlds that you do live in. And I think that you are a shining example for our generation of what it means to thrive in Mili de Alma and Mili de Shmaya.
I'm not so shining, okay? To participate in those worlds, yes.
We'll give you the compliments and you'll be humble. That's
a good combination.
But you know, we sit down with a lot of different types of guests, and I don't think we've had an opportunity to really sit down with someone who is stratting that balance.
Yeah, I don't think we have either.
I think it's a really unique opportunity for us to really get into what it means to grow up, to develop real relationships with tremendous Torah luminaries, the relationships that you've had with your Rebbeim, the Torah, the depth, the breadth of Torah that you've been able to really traverse and bring to today's generation in the masterful way in which you do, while at the same time trailblazing truly within the financial world, with the financial markets, the financial instruments that you've literally created as a brainchild of yours. I feel very, very honored to sit down with you
It's a great
and
pleasure.
to just get into a little bit of what you've been doing and how our generation can take on some of this type of avodah on a daily basis.
I think it'd be helpful to start the conversation sort of at Aleph. You know, like where you grew up. Who is Ari Bergman?
That's a good question. Yeah. That's a question I ask myself every day. Now, okay, my background a little bit, right? And I grew up in Brazil. I'm Brazilian. You could see from the accent, right? I'm not the US. I came from a non-religious family. They became religious through the time we became. And I went actually to Baltimore, to Yeshiva, to Ner Israel. I went to Ner Israel. I became very close to Rav Rudman, to the Rosh Yeshiva. We became like Ben Weiss by him. I went at that time to school, but I went only as an accountant. And then I went to Eretz Israel, and I learned in Ponevezh and in Hebron. Right? I learned in Ponevezh and Hebron. I got married to a Brazilian. My wife is Brazilian. So we actually got married. We lived in Eretz Israel and Koil. I came back to America, and I went to the world of accounting. Right? I was an accountant. I went at that time to Pricewaterhouse. Accounting wasn't for me. Okay, let's say the least, but it's a great profession, but I like looking forward, not looking backwards. So then I decided to go to the world of trading. Okay, it was interesting how I got to the world of trading. That's a separate story, but I did go to the world of trading. I joined at that time Drexel. Drexel was a great place. And from Drexel, I went to Bankers Trust. Bankers Trust, I helped develop the world of derivatives. And the world of derivatives, and that I was there in Bankers Trust until I decided to open my own business.
Let me ask you, you glossed over the fact that, you know, you grew up in Brazil and your family had become from. How old were you when your family, did they become from before you were born? Did they become from when
No. I was the first one to become from. I became from at around the age of 14, 15.
Wow.
And that, Baruch Hashem, we're a very close family. I brought my whole family to become, so the whole family.
So what was like growing up in Brazil, and what inspired you to become religious there?
Okay, so it's an interesting story, right? I was in Brazil. Brazil is a very Christian country, right? We never experienced anti-Semitism, but Brazilians always saw Jews as different, right? There was always this different identity. So we were different. And I always wanted to know, interesting, why it was different. And I actually went to a school which was a religious school called the Avne. And my parents were traditional. So I had actually a rabbi that came to learn with me. Actually, we learned about Metzia Perkel Metzias. Like, I forgot learning your Metzias. And I loved because there was a triangle of Chatichas Basar. So I thought it was very cool. And this, little by little, and we became also very close to Chabad. We became very, very close to Chabad. My father was instrumental in bringing Chabad to Brazil, which today is so successful. And little by little, I went to Yeshiva in Brazil, to Chabad Yeshiva in Brazil. And then my parents decided that I was becoming to Chabad, sent me away, and I went to Baltimore, and then the whole family became from. So that's basically the story.
Well, very interesting. I don't know much about the Brazilian Jewish community. Was it a large community then? Is it a large frum community now also?
The community became much frummer and grew a lot. The community is in Brazil, it's around 150,000 Jews.
Wow. I know our Argentina frum community is massive.
Yeah, I just came back from Buenos Aires now. Buenos Aires is an amazing community, right? It's much frummer, much larger, but Brazil became much frummer from the time, right? And in my time, the frum community was very, very small, but the Jewish community was large. Was basically 100,000 Jews in São Paulo, give or take, 80 to 100. But many of them came before the war, so they became non-religious, or non-Jewish even. But the community grew to become more religious. Chabad was very successful, and the Sfaradim became very, very, very successful. So, and they became from, so today the big communities are the Sephardi communities. There are two large communities. One with them is my old rabbi, Rav Dishi, he has a community called Hayim, a very large community, and it's growing. The community has grown a lot. But I went to Baltimore. I went to school. I got my CPA and the BTL. From there, I went to Eretz Israel. I actually sat, because I was very close to Rav Rudman, so Rav Rudman sent a letter to Rav Shach. I sat actually next to Rav Shach. I have stories galore sitting next to Rav Shach, because I sat with him actually next to him. And then,
what can you tell us about that time?
Now, I'll tell you a story that just happened. So I have the Hashgocha that just happened. It's a very interesting story. I was in Lawrence, right? Yeah. And as you know, Sunday, everybody comes to collect money. So this guy comes to collect money, knocks on the door, and I was learning and working, and I come and open the door, and the guy says, listen, I'm coming here to collect for a koil because Rabbi Aaron Leib Steinman told me to collect for a koil. So I told him, listen, if Rabbi Aaron Leib Steinman will tell you not to collect and you came to collect, I'll give you money. But if you tell me that Rabbi Aaron Leib told you to collect money, you and everybody else. So, but he says, I'm different. So I was like, if that's okay, you're different, please sit down and tell me you're different. Tell me what makes your koil different. He says, let me tell you the story. That's an unbelievable story. So he tells me, listen, I was a pilot at the Israeli Air Force, non-religious. There is always, they give you in the Air Force a 1-year Talmud. They give you, I know that, they give you 1 year for you to study something and they pay you for you to come back because the Air Force requires a lot more time. So I decided, he tells me that I want to go and study in Bnei Brak. Why did I get Bnei Brak? That's what I decided. So I go to Bnei Brak to learn for a year. After the year is over, I have to go back to the Air Force. My entire unit was disbanded. There was nobody there. There was nothing there. And I thought myself, listen, why should I go back? Now I'm becoming religious. I go back, I won't become religious. I said, listen, nobody remembers me anyway. It's a mess. And my unit was disbanded. I will stay. So somebody said, listen, you can't do that. Ask Rav Shach. So you went to ask Rav Shach. And he tells me, he asked Rav Shach, and Rav Shach answered to him, Lo chen yaseh b'mkomeinu. That's not how we do it here.
Wow.
You said to go, you go back.
Avart is avart.
Avart, the word Lo chen yaseh, he was paraphrasing the pasuk, right? By Besuel, Lo chen yaseh b'mkomeinu. That's not how we do things here. So he tells me, I went back. And to tell you what happens is that I went to the intelligence unit of the army, of the Air Force, because our unit was disbanded, and to show you that I was right, because right before they bombed the Iraqi core, the Iraqi nuclear reactor, I called Rav Shach to say Tehillim. I'm not sure if they got the message or not, but I did call him. I told him, you won't believe it. I was in Ponevezh at that year, and I sat next to Rav Shach. So it was Erev Shavuos. Listen, Erev Shavuos. And Erev Shavuos, everybody knows that on Erev Shabbos, on Erev Yontev, there is nobody in Beis Medrash. I was the only one sitting next, and Rav Shach wasn't there. I was sitting. Somebody comes running to me and says, listen, Rav Shach asked that you should go ahead and gather people to say Tehillim. I said, there's nobody here. So I listened and get people to say Tehillim. So I went ahead, I got people, I remember, got the minyan, and we went to, there was an entrance door, and we said Tehillim. That night, Shavuos night, I get the message, we heard that the Iraqi nuclear reactor was bombed. And I thought to myself, wow, I and Rav Shach and Menachem Begin were the only people who knew about it. I said, wow, this is Rav Shach, has a direct line to Menachem Begin.
And the guy is sitting in front of you in your house.
Right now in the house, he is the guy who called Rav Shach. So I told him, not only they said the Tehillim, I was the one who arranged the Tehillim for you.
Wow.
And boy, did he get a check.
No.
He didn't even know how differentiated.
He didn't even get the money because he forgot about the money. See, imagine Hashgocha that we have the guy.
That's unbelievable.
So this is
Did you take a picture with him at least?
No, I
Oh,
see him all the time. Now this is a guy who was a Rosh Kohen. I told him, I said the Tehillim on that day, and now I know how I said, told me, for me it's a letdown. Because I thought Menachem Begin called Rav Shach.
We should start a series of stories of people who go collect. I'm sure they have the most amazing stories.
I have stories. I can tell you from here to tomorrow. If you want to go, there's not going to be a podcast of an hour. It'll be a podcast of a week. I can tell you stories because it's amazing. And that's why I always think like this. When people come, Chazal say, right? Uleben shinai mecholov. That a person who smiles to an oni is more important than giving money because it's mizborach with many more brochas. You should learn more babasara, which means that's important to smile and to talk to them and to hear from them because you sometimes find out amazing stories.
On Purim, I think it's the famous thing on Purim. You have a wheel that people have to spin.
Once upon a time, I did that. Now
I would never. That's the reason I never went to your house. I was petrified. You have to spin a wheel.
What's this wheel?
You have to spin a wheel and it lands on an amount.
An amount, but you have to say Advar Torah to be your Zoche. And but the truth is, you get very interesting people. It's amazing stories. But imagine the story. I would have never known that the guy who said, and we finally, so he found out that the Tilmo said, and maybe that's why I was so successful. And I found out that there is not Menachem Begin, but this guy.
Is there another story that stands out to you from?
A million stories from Rav Shach's time. It's unbelievable because listen, I sat next to Rav Shach. Many things I can't say because we're private. But I saw outside from Rav Shach that most people didn't see. right? Because I was very close. I was sat next to him. But the truth is there, because it was so busy, I decided that I can't learn such a place. So I was there for only 3 months because I said, you know something, if I'm going to be here, I'm going to know every politic about every single thing in Eretz Yisrael besides learning. So, but I got very close at that time to the one Jimmy Trotsky, right? You know, the guy who wrote the Tzois and Davnei Miluim. He wrote the famous, every yeshiva today reads their Hagoes. Yes. And I was very friendly with him. He was a 14-year-old. And I remember the guy at 14 years old knew every single thing of every single achron. He knew, he asked him a kasha, he told the he knew all the stuff that he wrote here when he was 14 years old.
Wow.
So it was an amazing experience. But then I went to Yeshivat Hebron, I went to Hebron Yeshiva, and I became very close to Yeshiva. Today I see myself as Hebron, and that's a Pon Bishop.
Interesting. And then I guess you came back to America, you got married.
So I got married.
Well, your relationship with Ramosha Shapiro was from that time? Much later. Much later. Because at that time, if you know Roshach, the idea of machshava was not made for bochrim, for people who are single. So I did not do any machshava at that time. No, it was nothing. It was pure learning. At that time was that. So then I got married. My brother-in-law is Rabbi Hartman from the Gur Aryeh. Sure. He's in London, and we're very, very close.
Rabbi Cheskel's father?
Cheskel's father, he's
nice.
So we're very close. So Cheskel's my nephew.
Oh, wow.
So I went, and at that
Today's
time,
access to the Maharal.
Yes, so he was the one introducing to Ramosha. I became very close to Ramosha. We brought Ramosha here to America, and we became very close. At that time, but it was much later. So I came to America, worked, I went to Bankers Trust, and I opened my own business. My business is called Penso. That's what I do. We do derivatives, we do risk management for companies and trading in macro world. And that's what we do till today.
We'll be right back to this episode in just a second, but a quick word from my friends at Tovido.com. That is Tovido.com. Because when it comes to kids content, there's no better place than Tovido.com. It is high quality. It is fresh and exclusive. New content every single week is up on Tovido.com. That's one of the reasons why you need to head to them right now. Tovido.com, create an account today. Use promo code MM10 for 10% off. That is MM10 for 10% off. Hit the link in the show notes in the description of this episode. Tovido.com is creating amazing, thrilling, exciting, thoughtful content for your kids, especially going to L. This is stuff that you want them to be watching because they can be learning a lot from it. Enough of that stuff that you don't really learn much from, and enter Tovido. It will change the way your kids take in media. Tovido.com. We'll be right back. But first, quick word from my friends at Alpert & Associates. Yes, Seremian. You know, Moshe is in the middle of writing a book about finances, and this is really applicable to really all he is about when it comes to financial planning. The basis of the book is explaining things in simple terms. You know, sometimes you go places and they start explaining it to you, and you're like, what in the world are they saying? They don't want you to know what they're saying. They just want you to know, oh, wow, this guy must be smart. He really is speaking in big terms. Moshe explains things to you in terms that you can understand because he wants you to get it. He wants you to understand how to be financially successful. He wants you to understand what it means to plan for the future and how you can make sure that your finances are not going to be a point of stress in your family. That's why he's writing this book, but that's why you should be working with Moshe Alpert when it comes to your finances. So make sure you deal with a person who's honest and a straight shooter, and that is Moshe Alpert. Make sure to give him a call today. It's 718-644-1594. That is 718-644-1594. Get in touch with him. albertmoshe@gmail.com. Now back to this episode. So it seems like you have a very rich history, especially when you became from and you learned around some pretty incredible people. So nowadays, the question for a lot of people who have that history is, maybe I go learn full time, maybe I don't learn, I work. But when we were talking about having you on the podcast, me and Momo were talking, I said, Ari Bergman's like the shining example of what a balabas is. You can close your ears when I say this, it's fine. But you learn, you work, but like you are able to balance that. Yeah, you give shirim.
And I got my PhD also, right?
Oh,
and
hello.
then I decided to get my PhD because I'll tell you after the story. So because I believe in consilience, right? In a word called consilience. What's consilience?
Yeah, I was waiting for a moment.
Nodding profusely.
Consilience is the integration, right? The things, not only that you could put things together, you could coordinate things together. Consilience tells you that the more things you put together, each one is better. It's not that you're able to reconcile things. You see, to be a balabos in itself is a bad connotation, because I tell all my students, if somebody says, okay, this for a balabos is not bad, is the biggest insult somebody can give you. In other words, had you been learning, is something else. But now as a balabos, okay, that's not bad.
That's what we've given it. Like that's sort of why do you think it has a negative connotation?
Because it's b'diavad. It tells you that you have to give up something.
Yet 90% of the people who are watching and listening to this, and of Klal Yisrael are balabatim.
Yes, but balabatim. So therefore, I think
in the plural it has less of a negative connotation. I'm not kidding.
Balabatim,
but it
doesn't have as negative versus balabos.
Because you see a guy saying a Dvar Torah, right, saying a shiur. Many people say, okay, for a balabos, that's not bad. So in other words, the expectations are low, and you beat the low expectations. The bar is very low.
And you
I don't buy
that.
I don't. The world of concealance tells you that sometimes, for a few people, combining things make you actually better. Not only that you have to give up.
It's the tiferes that emerges from chesed and
It's
gevura.
exactly right. Tiferes is always bigger. It's exactly right. It is built in the world of tiferes. In Chazal, it's called the maskala. In maskala is the beginning of Safra Detzniusa that tells you the world was created with a scale. So this idea of the balance, it's not that you're balancing things, you're giving things up, but the world was created, right? Safra Detzniusa, Safra de Shakla Bemaskala. It says the world, the book of secrets of the Zohar, the Safra Detzniusa, is a book that was created in a scale, because the world is a scale. So you have to balancing things out to use something better. And I totally believe that.
So how did you balance that in a world which is so black or white? You know,
it's a challenge, but it's good. Meaning you have to go ahead and you have. I think the important part of it is that you have to set your goals straight and to think what you, at least for me, right, what I'm planning to do with my life, and how can you? I think that all of us have a unique contribution. And it's very unique. One story that has always, not always, but has been a guiding post and a guiding light to me is the story of Ilfa in Daf Chaf Aleph in Tainis. The story of Ilfa and Rabbi Yochanan, right? The Ilfa and Rabbi Yochanan, they were both decided to go to work. And Rabbi Yochanan hears the Malachim say, these people are leaving Chai Olam to go to Chai Shah. They're leaving eternal life for mundane life. Let's kill them. Okay, let's kill them. But thank God there's always two malachim, because all the malach tells you 1 second. Wait a second, give me a second. don't kill him just because of that. So listen, so what happens is Rabbi Yochanan hears it. Rabbi Yochanan says, okay, since I heard it, and he asks Ilfa, did you hear something? Ilfa says, no, I didn't hear anything. So Rabbi Yochanan says, okay, the message is for me, because the malach said, don't kill them, because one of them, the time is right now. Which means he understood he'll be a Rosh Yeshiva. So Rabbi Yochanan left and became a Rosh Yeshiva. And Ilfa went to work. By the way, the name Ilfa, the Aruch says his name is called a boat. He's a merchant boat, because his essence, at the end, he became this merchant. He comes back to the base medrash, right, after years, and they say to him, had you stayed in learning, you would have been the Rosh Yeshiva instead of Rabbi Yochanan. Which is the message that I'm always afraid. People say, okay, well, you're in Yeshiva, you should have stayed in Yeshiva, you'd be a Rosh Yeshiva. So the Ilfa tells the people, you know something, I'm going to be hanging on the mast of the boat. And if you ask me any brisa out there that there is no allusion to it in the Mishnah, and I don't find an allusion to the Mishnah, I'll kill myself. Okay? So in other words,
high stakes.
That's it, the high stakes, but also a test. Very funny. How did Ilfa know that every brisa is in the Mishnah? So says Reb Shira Goyen, that was his finding. So in other words, he did a test on something that he just made it up. This is his contribution. We only know that every brisa is in the Mishnah from Ilfa. Mm-hmm. And he goes, and Eliyahu Hanavi comes to ask him a question. The Bechina was not just a rabbi, it was Eliyahu Hanavi, Hal Saba. And asks him, if somebody right before his death tells him,
this is before those Shasid fires. This is like the OG.
This was the real. This was because it's somebody big, and nobody else could fire him because nobody else knew this halacha. He just made up a klal. He says, "Test me on this."
They called Rabbi Eliyahu.
Yes. So imagine Eliyahu Hanavi comes and asks him, and asks him somebody before he dies. He tells his kids to do this and this. the Brisa says, and the Mishnah, so he says, this is the Mishnah idea of mitzvah lekayim divrei ames. And he was right, and he passed the test. Very funny also. Eliyahu Hanavi is asking him a question about somebody who says he gives an order before he dies. The only guy who didn't die is asking you halacha about somebody to say right before his deathbed. What a funny thing.
Yeah.
But I think that's the answer. Ilfa said, I have a contribution. Ilfa realized that he has a life, that he's working and he is learning. If he's going to learn every brisa, he would never make it. So he said, you know something? I have to be able to find every brisa in the Mishnah. So I could learn the Mishnah because the Mishnah is an anthology. So because he was working, he was able to find out something that the guy learning could never find out. The guy has enough time. If you have enough time to learn all the brises, why should you find the allusions in the Mishnah? So therefore, Eliyahu Hanavi asks him a question about death. Because sometimes, if you don't experience death, you can't understand death. So Rabbi Eliyahu says, I don't know mitzvah lekayim divrei ames because I need somebody who's a mortal to know. Sometimes you have to be a mortal to understand death. Sometimes you have to have lack of time to understand things. This is the idea. Consilience tells you that if, and I always say like this, let's say Ilfa would have gone back to yeshiva, become a Rosh Yeshiva. What happens? He'll be the Rosh Yeshiva and Rabbi Yochanan will be unemployed. So because he wanted to work, Rabbi Yochanan became a Rosh Yeshiva. He was the one, according to the Rambam, who did the Yerushalmi, and Ilfa became a Balbos, and he taught us a halacha that till today, thousands of years later, we know that every brisa is alluded to in the Mishnah because he didn't have time and he had to find that out.
Wow.
What else do we know about Ilfa,
necessity being the mother of invention.
The necessity is the mother of invention. And this in learning, that's consilience. And this is the contribution that all of us have to give. So I look at it, this is life. So in other words, I don't want to be a b'diavad.
Right. No, I totally agree with that. And do you think that there's systemically nowadays there's this sort of b'diavad attitude around Baal Batim? I imagine that's what you're saying. And if so, how do we change that?
I think that unfortunately there is, that we can go, but how you change, like Yosef says, let's change ourselves. The idea is let's raise the bar. I think that one of the issues are that we're always afraid to fail. So therefore, because you're afraid to fail, we keep the bar very low, because if you keep the bar very low, you never fail. And as we know, if you never failed in life, it means that you never aimed high enough.
This is when Nachi tells us how many shots Michael Jordan missed, no?
Yeah. Michael Jordan, he missed
there's a major stat like that, right?
Do you know the stat?
Something like he missed
the most. Irv would know it.
I think, yes. Shout out.
Yeah.
To my father.
And that's the idea. So the idea is you got to try. Yeah. You have to set up a goal, aim high. That's it. Meaning that's why I decided to go for my PhD. I collect books. I love the history of Penso de la Vega. I didn't even know Penso de la Vega. How did I find out? Because I collect antique books. And my wife said, you know something, I collect antique books, but I don't know anything about it, like we do. So why don't I go and study history? I said, you know something, Columbia University has a master's in liberal arts, that a guy working can do it. So I'm going to go and study from one of the biggest luminaries in Jewish history in the world. His name was Yosef Hayim Yerushalmi, right? The guy who wrote Zachor. And I decided I'm going to go, and I actually...
Those are some nuggets that you dropped right there.
Yeah.
Yes.
You named the number one book in Jewish history.
Yes, in my view, it's called Zachor.
Zachor?
It's a must. It's always a big fan of Zachor. Zachor is the classic of Jewish history.
You think David reads like the whole books, or he just skims the back cover?
We'll never know. But you have to read the whole book to test him, because otherwise it seems like he reads a book of Shabbos. But this book is very short, but very powerful. But this guy, Yosef Hayim Yerushalmi, and it's amazing, right? In New York, the biggest professor, he gave, and I actually went to study with him. But interestingly enough, when I was studying with him, I was supposed to start. He was on a sabbatical, writing a book on Shevet Yehuda. And I had no one to go to. So then I realized there is somebody who teaches Talmud at Columbia University.
How old are you when this happened?
I was already 45.
So you're married, family success
working,
in business,
yes,
and you're like, you know what?
To go back to school.
You want to
Consilience, exactly. I thought that I'm uniquely positioned to really take advantage of it. And I said, something, you have to aim your bar high. Listen to this. I went there, and it was a funny story because I go and Yosef Yerushalmi, see Hashgocha, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you opportunities. What happened was he was away. So I have nothing to do. I came to study Jewish studies. Who am I going to study with? So then I realized that there is Talmud at Columbia University, given by somebody called David Weiss Halivni, Professor David Weiss Halivni. And I thought to myself, Talmud, how can they teach Talmud at Columbia University? That's crazy. And then I look at David Weiss Halivni and I saw the Jewish Observer, and they had making him like the Satan incarnate. Okay, so I said, so I have to see it. But I have to get Chavrusa to watch me that I should not become fry going there, right?
Shomer.
So yes, the Gemara says, right? The Shomer and then each one needs to protect each other. So I went actually to somebody very choshuv that was there in law school. You guys know, I don't mention the name, I'm not sure if he wants it. And we went and said, okay, we're going to do we are going to
we're going to go to this
protect each other. And I went there, and I went the first day, and I started arguing with him, with this David Weiss Halivni.
And he must have had a semester.
And love at the first sight. We became very close.
Really?
Professor David Weiss Halivni. He was a Boki B'chol Torah Kula. He was a Yerushalmi. The people missed it.
From Guyana?
From Guyana, absolutely. Schizophrene. And actually, when I got my master's, I wanted to go for a PhD, for a doctorate. And Yosef Chaim Yerushalmi wanted me to do a doctorate on Jewish history, on my the continuation of my master's thesis. But David Professor Halivni wanted me to do on Talmud. And I actually did my PhD on Talmud under him, right? He was the Israel Prize of Talmud. He was, and till today, I've actually published my book, a lot of the learning. I have a whole series on that. It's an amazing contribution to the world Torah that was completely ignored because he was at Columbia University.
Do you have a PhD in Talmud?
Yes, and I did teach. I taught at Columbia. I taught at Penn for 3 years, and I teach at Yeshiva University and the college.
Wow. Tell me something about Talmud that I don't know.
Okay, let's
talk about a layup.
No, but it's an amazing thing.
I went to Yeshiva Rockaway. I'm just saying. Yeah, go ahead.
And I think that's a contribution to Yeshiva that we have. Anybody wants to see the formation of the Talmud? My book is called The Formation of the Talmud. I published an academic book, which connects the Talmud to, because when he went there, I'll tell you the story. The first class, I was arguing with him all the time. He says, something, your version of history is Rabbi Yitzchok Isaac Halevi in Ner Israel Rishonim. Ner Israel Rishonim is the famous book on Jewish history for Rabbi Yitzchok Isaac Halevi, who was the founder and the engineer and the architect of the Aguda. Agudas Israel. The idea of Aguda came from him. He was the one who's founder. He says, Ari, tells me at the first class, why don't you write a dissertation on Rabbi Yitzchok Isaac Halevi? And he tells Professor Halivni that I learned by Rav Rudman when I decided to go to college. Rav Rudman told me, listen, if you're already going to college, write on Rabbi Yitzchok Isaac Halevi, the biggest Jewish historian of the 19th and 20th century. And I never did. So I want you, tells me, to fulfill my obligation. And I actually wrote my dissertation on comparing the different approaches to the formation of the Talmud, starting with Rabbi Yitzchok Isaac Halevi and the foundation of the Aguda, because I connected the idea of the Aguda came directly from how he understood that the Talmud came about. Wow. So he did the Talmud of the 21st century called Agudas Israel. And this is the issue today that's becoming such a hot issue. But that's it.
We'll be right back with a quick word from my friends at Nishmat. Yes, the Jeannie Schottenstein Center for Advanced Torah Study for Women is back with another online semester of Torah learning. Get ready for this from the comfort of your own home, that is. Starting September 8th, study Talmud, Tanakh, Halacha, and share with some of the best Torah teachers from Yerushalmi in the comfort of your own home. Classes are open to all women of all different types of learning backgrounds. Make sure you hit the link in the show notes in the description of this episode and get in touch today so you can take advantage of this amazing program. Hey, is this an episode of Meaningful People if we did not mention Infinity Land Services? I don't think so. Yes, Mark Hershkowitz from ILS is the guy you want taking care of your title. Doesn't matter if you're selling and buying $150 million in real estate or $1 million or 500,000 or 700,000, your first home. When it comes to title, you want someone in your corner you can trust. And I actually got to meet him last week for the first time, and I was so happy. He's a guy you can trust. He's the guy you want in your corner. That is Mark Hershkowitz from ILS Title. So you're speaking to your real estate agent. You're about to buy your first piece of property, your first home, your first apartment, whatever it is. Hey, so we're going to get title set up. Who do you want to use? And you're going to be like, ilstitle.com, ilstitle.com, ilstitle.com. That is Infinity Land Services, because they are the best in the entire industry, the most trustworthy in the entire industry. And that's why you're going to choose ilstitle.com. I want to bring up another hot issue and speak about this a little bit, which is the climate that we live in today, the culture we live in today amongst, from people, maybe Balbatim, people living beyond their means, people thinking that if they're leaving the yeshiva world and they're going to work, it means they're having to live a certain lifestyle and have certain things. And if they're going to the working world, they're sort of, like we said, b'diavad, and they can, look the other way when it comes to tznius and opulence and spending money. What would you say to what message would you give to the new young generation of Balbatim that are feeling that pressure to be that way and are falling into that trap?
And I think that's our mission is to be exactly the opposite. You could be a Yerushalmi, and you don't have to compromise your Olam Haba, because Olam Haba doesn't start there, it starts here. I'm telling you, the idea is, what does money give you? For me, what does money give you?
Access?
No, I don't think access, you need money. It's called freedom.
Freedom. Okay.
That you could do whatever you need. In other words, you don't depend on anybody, you could go. But the more needs you have, the less freedom you have. So what's the purpose of working? You realize something. If you want to work to have a better car, and it requires more hours, then you have to decide, does it make sense or not? In life, it's always a decision and a balance, because you have to balance family, Torah and learning, mitzvahs, your mission in life, and to have Olam Haba here. If you are going to wait to die to have Olam Haba, you're missing the opportunity. Chazal always gave the bracha, Olamcha tireh b'chayecha. You should have Olam Haba here. The more you have, see, Rav Rudman used to say, right? Luxuries turn into necessities. Necessities you don't appreciate. You just feel bad when you don't have it. So
that takes away freedom. Necessities take away freedom.
Takes away freedom. So then you become a slave of your money. So what's the purpose of working? Then just don't. If you can, the freedom to be able to do it, to shine, to have a life that you make, it's the most important. The less you need, the less you have. Now, clearly it's a challenge. No question. For me also, it's a Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara keeps you very, very busy, like the Mesilas Yesharim says, right? Tichbad aleim ha'avoida v'alisha b'divrei shaker. The Mesilas Yesharim, that's a Mesilas Yesharim that always carries me in life. The Yetzer Hara tells you like Paro. Tichbad aleim ha'avoida. Make them work hard. V'alisha b'divrei, they won't have time to think anything else. You work very hard, work to be able to prove yourself, to get access. Who needs access? Access, you yourself can have access. People work for access because that access is not real. It's only because of money. And people cut corners. We make life so complicated for ourselves instead of making it challenging, meaningful, right? Well, I don't think it's meaningful people. I think all of us are not meaningful or nothing. But
Simchas Purim,
right. Meaningful. What meaningful? But meaningful life is important. So you should be instead of meaningful people, meaningful life, right? That's what you want.
I think everyone's meaningful, you know? Everyone has a chelek HaKavimal.
Exactly right. But meaningful is life you have to turn meaningful, right? You have to make life meaningful.
So I like that framework because there is, as Nachi's framing the issue, there is a tremendous pursuit for financial success. And there's a lot of pressure.
What does financial success mean, people?
And what does it facilitate? I love the framework that you're offering, which is if your success financially is not facilitating freedom to live the life that you actually want to live, do you want to exercise your bechira to be koina olam haba in this world? If your financial success is not facilitating that, then for what are you pursuing it?
Is that right? And not only to be koina olam haba, to turn life into olam haba.
To transform this existence.
That's exactly right. I think to be koina olam haba, it means that you're giving it up for something else.
Like Rabbi Akiva Eiger said, well, what's going to be with the Zaylam Haza?
Yes. No, there's not Rabbi Akiva Eiger. Baron Kotler said that. And that's the idea, because if you start competing with the Joneses, the essence is the more physical, the more you have, the more you need. You realize that's in Chazal. We could go on and on it. But for me, life is, make life easy. You make enough to be able to, in other words, you always have to balance meaningful life. How much of the work is making life meaningful and how much life is taking away from meaningful life. And that's it. There is a barrier and there's a limit.
Well, let's say the guy who is successful and he is, making a lot of money, but the things that he's spending it on are just, there's no end. It could be a $50,000 kiddush. It could be chartering private jets to go fly to ball games. Like there's no end. And that seems to be something that's plaguing so many of our frum communities. What is the solution to that, though?
The Gvir culture.
The Gvir culture, yeah.
It is a crazy, self-destructive thing. Tell people, life is not this. Who are you kidding yourself? If you're spending $50,000 in a kiddush, okay, good luck. It's life. There's so much more to it. Again, taste is something that you develop. You have to develop taste and constantly, clearly the Yetzer Hara. I don't have a Yetzer Hara for good things, absolutely. And do I fall for the Yetzer Hara? Absolutely. But you always have to think, and I always have to think, is it worth it? Is it worth it? Life to compromise and to do things. And you think to yourself, a $50,000 kiddush, I spent my koiches to generate the $50,000 for a kiddush. Is it worth? Can I do something much better with $50,000? I'm going to tell you something New York is amazing. I went to Columbia University. Forget about Frumkeit. Columbia University. You had the biggest luminaries. Yosef Hayim Yerushalmi, the greatest historian. And I had a chabura with him called a seminar on Zachor, on Shevet Yehuda, the most amazing things, the biggest expert in the world. How many people were there? 3 people. 3 people. I think to myself, how stupid the world is. You have the greatest guy here. And people are just wasted. The greatest talents. Why? Because we spend our times and our efforts looking at shtusim. You could do that with your life. Everybody has his own life. But you have the life that you built. Don't complain about the life that you built.
Yeah, and that outcome presumably is the result of what we glorify.
Right. And the taste. You have to always aim high, push yourself high, and always keep the parameters. But again, who you glorify. Exactly right. Who do you look up to? Who are the people that you think is meaningful? But meaningful people always starts from meaningful lives. That's the problem. Look at their lives. See, they're meaningful. The children, the family, how happy they are. Look at their lives. Life has to be meaningful, but we have to build. Hashem build us a life and give us the freedom to build the life that we want. And the truth is, the more you need of money, the less of a life you have. Imagine the life that you don't need anything. How gewaltig it is. Because then the money that you have gives you total freedom.
They say the story of the fisherman in Bora Bora, some island. So there's this big hedge fund billionaire who went to the island, and he says to the guy, he says, how do you do this here? He says, I catch some fish and I eat it, and that's what I do. He said, no, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go out a little earlier one morning. And he starts mapping out this entire business plan. And he says, you're going to buy another boat. And then you're going to hire a couple of people, and you're going to create a whole business plan for how he's going to scale this business and profit. And eventually you're going to sell it to a private equity. He says, and then what am I going to do? He says, and then you'll be able to relax and enjoy your life with your family. He's like, I'm doing that right now.
That's exactly right. Now, if you want to go ahead and some people say, okay, I want to change the world and I need money to do that. That's also good. That's also good. But then it's always a meaningful life. But then if you want to change the world and you say, okay, $50,000, I'm already just wasting on a kiddush. I could have changed the world more. So no, if you have a goal, if you have a plan, a meaningful life, Say, okay, my money is to enable this meaningful life.
You got to keep yourself honest.
So you're going to say $50,000 in the Kiddush? How does that make a meaningful life? How does that fit in the plan? It doesn't take it away from the plan. That's it.
I want to put you in the hot seat just for a second about this topic, because I think that this is just, this culture is so enmeshed in our society. Like organizations, great, amazing organizations are spending insane sums of money to make barbecues and dinners for people to come to raise more money. And that's just the culture that we created. And wouldn't it be an amazing thing if that organization that is using the money for incredible things didn't have to spend $500,000 to raise $3 million? What's the medicine to get away from that? How do we break that down?
See, I'm very much now involved in something called social change. Social change never comes from the top. I just had we had a meeting, like a thought group on social change.
Ooh, who's in this thought group?
We can't, this is the Batsnuim Chochma. But social change is very important, Achi. That's a question. But you never change from the top. Change is always grassroots, from the bottom, imperceptibly. We have, like, if you are interested in seeing books of how to these things achieved, and we are working on this. Because this is, I'm going to tell you something. If we have the glorification of a lot of money, of people who live a high life, if that is what we glorify, that's what you're training to your children. Does a stalker that spends all that money to create, do I respect such a stalker? Probably not. But
what they have to do.
It's not their fault, but we have to change the community. And again, the focus has to be meaningful lives.
So let's double click on that. Love the framework. Social change will not be driven by top down, but rather grassroots.
My whole book, by the way, the whole idea of the book, by the way, you guys are invited. The book is, I made the book available for free on the electronic version. If you buy the real version on Amazon, it's much more money. But if you buy it's available, right? It's called Ari Bergman, Information with Talmud. It's built. That the mistake was, well, I can't say mistake, but that the Talmud, the Gemara, was not built top down. You see from history and from Chazal and from the Rishonim, it was bottoms up. Because it bottoms up. The change, the Gemara, was given this authority bottoms up. So never top down. Top down is a fallacy and an invention of the 19th century. And the Rabbi Yitzchok Isaac Halevi made the Talmud top down to validate the structure of the institutions. But as many people at that time, and today we see that,
it causes revolt.
It never did it. I even had our meeting, he said, show me one successful case of a top-down social change on the last 7,000 years. I mean, we know humans history 17. Nobody could come up with anything. Maybe Singapore. I can show you that the bottoms-up changes. So if you want to change that,
it starts with everyone listening.
Absolutely. Listening.
But what's a step along that spectrum?
The first step is meaningful life. Look at back,
but that's very broad.
What's my life? No, what's meaningful life? What I want in my life? What am I looking for? And have this meaning, and meaningful life is a life, I believe, Olam Haba here, to make you happy. And then you go ahead and say, okay, what do I need to get there? And it's always give and take. You're always adjusting yourself, but you need to think about life. You need to step back. I think that mindfulness is very important. Mindfulness is that you stop and look at the present, look at life, enjoy life. You don't have to go and to travel these exotic trips that you spend all this money, that you spend thousands of dollars a night, and to constantly be running to enjoy life. Make life simple. Simplicity is so important. And we have to show this. We have to show this, it's not that you are earning Olam Haba because of this. You're turning this into Olam Haba. If you want to have the Midas touch, the Midas touch is that we turn this life, which is full of frustrations, full of sadness, into Olam Haba, into a world that is bliss. We need that. So that Midas touch is how to create a meaningful life. And we have to look for it. Because it's within us. That's what it is.
Shifting gears somewhat, but still staying in the same topic. There's an issue that I want to just frame for you, and I'd love to hear how you're thinking about this, because I see this as something that's going to become more problematic probably over the next 10 to 20 years.
Oh, a scoop, yeah.
And it's based on a statistic actually that Shulam Lemmer shared with us. He said within the Bells and Moistus, just within Bells, there have been as many children born in the last 10 years as there were in the 80 years prior since the Holocaust, and which is unbelievable. We are growing Klal Yisrael at a clip, because with each generation it's just compounding, and it's a Meyer de Gezach. And the Moistus are going to have to, and that's just in Bells, by the way.
Yeah.
So the
Satmar, I think there is like 50, if I'm not mistaken, there is like some 50 Sholem Zochers every week, something like that. Like
it's a lot of arbus from my
Yes, and the girls also is out of it, something like that.
So therefore, what's clear is that the infrastructure, our moistus, are going to have to grow and keep up with the growth of Klal Yisrael in a way that we know. We're actually going to be sitting down with Maury Litwack today, who's prolific in facilitating public funding and governmental.
Teach Coalition, yeah.
But Lamaisa, there is a tremendous burden for our moistus on the wealth of Klal Yisrael. And as we grow, how do we realistically plan for our moistus, who are so dependent on the financial success of the wealthier class? How will our moistus keep up with the growth of
And again, see, you have to unpack what you said. Again, if we are relying on the very wealthy people, so then we're expecting that there is no economic downturns, which is a miracle. Meaning,
we're potentially in one right now.
Like, that's nothing, but we could have an economic downturn. That's cycles of life always happen. So therefore, we need simplicity. We need simplicity in our education. Even our education, right? You need the rabbeim to be paid, but to give the kids all the luxuries in the world and to create expectations. Is this the right thing? Simplicity.
Everyone wants to do what's best for their kid. I mean, I think many would argue with that and say that when it comes to our kids' education, we should go all out and make sure they. I mean, where are you saying to cut? Like what? Like
Can you give an example? We started Yeshiva Ketana of Long Island.
Yeah.
We started. How did we start? I started some ways this.
Robbie Flegman.
Yes. Yeah. So we were 4 people started. Robbie Flegman and myself. We started 2, and then we got 2 more people. Okay, Josh and Avi Pfeiffer. We had. You talk about the Gvirim. We made the yeshiva on our credit cards. We were credit cards. I was working at that time. I was a worker. And we started a yeshiva. Let's talk about aim high. Did we have an idea how we're going to do it? No. We started on our credit cards. Totally bottom up. And it was a yeshiva made. And I'm telling you a story. If you think I can't hear stories from here today, I'm telling you, this is a story that you see Hashem helps you. If you do what you can and you rely on Hashem, Hashem will help you. We were the first year, we had a huge deficit. And we didn't know how to cover. We were maxed out on the credit cards. So let's talk about the Gvirim. We don't buy the Gvir culture. I don't want the yeshiva to be bought. So how did you do it? We had a rabbi called by Winder. He comes to me. He says, you know something, Ari? I'm in this community bank, and my community bank is going public. And I don't know what to do with it. Maybe you could do something with it. I look at this and my God Almighty, this is a community bank going public. At that time was a fever that when they went public, you got the premium right away. So I said, how many? So I structured the deal. We got somebody to give us a loan. We bought the shares, and so in the same day, we made $200,000 and some odd $1,000. They paid the entire deficit for the year.
Wow.
I said to Robbie at that time, I said, if Hashem would have sent us a check from the bank, drawn in bank Shomayim Bank, it would have been a lesser of a nest than this. We sold it in the day the community bank was, the rabbi didn't know, and the yeshiva supported. So you don't need it. If you do, and we had nothing. We were in the basement of our Torah. We had no facilities, No, nothing. Kids played basketball in the hallway.
But now they do. But now they do have facilities.
But at that time, my kids went there, and I could not ask for a better education. Now the kids have everything, right? They have the yeshiva grew, and the yeshiva has facilities, etc., etc. But again, what's important, Nachi, to give for education to the kids?
I have to express personally. My wife and I have 3 boys in Yeshiva Ketana.
And Yeshiva Ketana started with an idea. One day I will tell you the story of Yeshiva Ketana, because guys don't know the story. One day I tell you the real story. But the bottom line is that all of these assumptions that we have to be built on the wealthy people in the community. And with them, I just don't buy it.
No, but I think what I'm taking what Momo was saying is we're trying to tell people, step back, live simple lives. Don't make yourself crazy and go to work 100 hours a week and everything like that. It's not necessary. But at the same time, the Maizdes are relying on the people to make that money to power their Maizdes. So it's sort of like a hamster wheel.
Yeah,
again, and if one stops, the other stops.
No, it's not. And I just told you, the Yeshiva Ketana of Long Island was not built on the Gvirim.
But at this point where we are right now,
that doesn't change anything. The great changes of life. Now, some people have to be a Gvir because that's their mission in life. And that's very important. I know somebody, Eli Horn, a friend of mine, he's very wealthy. He wanted to stop working. So David Abuchatzira told me, your mission in life is to work. Absolutely, Gvirim there is a room in Gvirim. Absolutely. And they have an unbelievable mission in life.
That's a very important message for someone who leaves yeshiva and they might feel like b'diavad. They might feel like less.
Right.
They're
but
not.
You cannot say that you can only have a meaningful life that either you are a big Talmud Chacham or you are a multimillionaire. That's not the life. That's not life. There is a lot in between that you could do so much contribution to Klal Yisrael. I told you, Yeshiva Ketana was built on 4 guys who maxed out their credit cards.
I love that.
And that was the most successful yeshiva possible. And I can tell you stories. And by the way, the beauty of it is, because we didn't have any money, it was fun every moment. Tell you how to find out and to be creative and find solutions to solve the yeshiva.
Yeah, when kesef ya'ana sakol, when money's the answer to everything, and you don't have money, then you need to come up with some answers.
And that's givaldic. That makes you creative.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, the first thing, I have stories. We did a movie that we got into so much trouble because we did a movie. I didn't even tell you. It's a very choshev guy who did it. And he decided to do it in Carmel Beach. And he was interviewing people with the Yeshiva Ketana. And we got so much flack for it. But it was fun from day one. It was Gan Eden in this world. To the point, if Hashem says, listen, you don't get to Elam Haba for it. I'll tell you, I already got it.
Gewalt.
Switching gears, I want to ask you, I sometimes have a very interesting brain. And when I read a lot of about Jewish history and our Weiss, to me, there's so much I don't know. And there's so many players and characters that exist within our Torah and within the Talmud that I just don't know a lot about. And like there's these hidden stories within. Given that you have a PhD in Talmud and you know a lot, is there a specific story, a person in Talmud or in the Torah that stands out to you as someone that we need to know more about? Is it a baya or is it?
Love that question, by the way.
There's so many things. Like we just mentioned someone who
I think like this. I actually give a course at YU. Now I'm giving. It's called the Schools of Agada. Mm-hmm. I think Agadata are stories that inform your life. And to each one of us, we have a different hero that try to emulate. I thought my hero?
Ilfa. I think most people you hear the word Ilfa, they think it's from the Frozen, the movie.
Yes, exactly right. Ilfa is the Frozen.
That's Olaf.
That's hysterical.
Yes, yeah. Olaf and Ilfa.
Like really, if I went to the street right now and I asked 20 from guys, do you know who Ilfa is? They'd say, I'm not from here.
And each one of us has to have a story in the Gemara that is the shining light of your life. But you have to learn and to find it. I actually give a course in YU on this, right? I give 2 courses. I give, this year I'm giving 2 courses. First, the Schools of Agada, because the different people, you see different people learn Agada differently. It's not only a person, but you see the stories, who Abaye was. you see them in different frameworks because you're different, right? So you've got to find your story that illuminates your life. That's very, very important.
Who should be my hero? Give me a hero.
No. Yes.
Assign me one. Assign me one.
No. The assignment was worth nothing.
But you have a hero?
David HaMelech.
Really? That's so basic.
No, but even David HaMelech.
Sorry.
Why? Because you have to go ahead, but you have to find the story in the Gemara, because the Gemara is full of stories. Those stories are paradigms, right? Those are historical events. Those are paradigms. Those are ideas that you've got to adopt. So that's why it's very important. You have to find your idea of finding somebody who you could relate to, who is your shining light. But again, you have to find the story, because you can't emulate a person. It's too much, Nachim. But take a story of the Gemara. There's so many interesting stories that say, okay, this is me. This is how I look at it. It's amazing. That's the way to do it.
To me, when we interviewed Rabbi Dr. Henry Abramson, and of course, who has a PhD in like Eish Kodesh, right? Like in the PSSNA, I think. I don't know. But when he
wrote a book on the PSSNA,
when he told me that the teachings of the Eish Kodesh was dug up by some Polish digger with an excavator, and that's how we have access to his Torah, what my brain went to is, who is this digger? Who is this Polish excavator guy who had the schus to dig up,
to reveal the Eish
Kodesh, to reveal the Torah of the PSSNA? Like, I want more stories of that, of people in the Gemara. Like, I want to know. Like, I don't know. I say this to my wife all the time. She says, "Get over it." Like, what do you want already? But there's so many people we don't know about. No,
absolutely. Now, interestingly enough, my name is called our business is called Penso, Penso. Why Penso? Because derivatives, the first formulas to create derivatives, was something created in like 50 years ago by Myron Scholes, Fisher Black. It's called the Black-Scholes formula. But we know that derivatives existed way before. The first book on the modern financial markets, which really talks about derivatives, talks about options, about futures, is a book written in 1688. And it's still one of the 10 best books ever on the financial markets, right? 1688. The next book was 1850, Robert McKay. So that book in 1688 was a book written about the stock trading of the Company of the West Indies in Amsterdam.
Close to 1840. You said 1850 was the next one.
Yes,
and David Bashevkin's 1840.
Exactly right. Maybe that 1840 brought like the Zohar.
He was so
brought
close.
The light into the world. But that book is called The Euphoria of the Markets by Robert McKay. So it's not that great. But be as it may, 1688, the first book. It's a book written in Spanish called Confusión de Confusiones, Confusion of All Confusions. But a main part of it was written by a guy called Yosef Penso de la Vega, which was a Frum guy.
Wow.
That's why it was written in Spanish about the trading with the Company of the West Indies in Amsterdam. It was not written in Dutch because he was with that company. And the book is 400 pages. 300 is about the Gemara. So you have 300 pages talking about the Talmud and 100 pages about the market.
Like outright talking about Talmud or subliminally?
No, outright comparing sugyot and this and that and comparing all kinds of things because he was wondering about the markets. Interesting, he talks about derivatives, talks about futures, talks about all kinds of stuff. And this is 100 years before calculus, right? Calculus is the basics of measuring those instruments. And calculus is Leibniz and Newton 100 years later. So this guy, Harvard actually translated the book into English, but made from a 400-page book into an 80-page book because he took all the Talmud away. They said, we're not Talmudists. We can't do it. This is the top first book by more than 100 years. So derivatives existed. I didn't create it. Derivatives existed it's interesting. They didn't have the math to price those things. It was just by gut. And it's crazy how similar it is to our markets.
I'm going to have 100 questions about all this stuff, really.
So that was derivatives. So this is it. So I think that I'm a Gilgal of him. I actually went to his cafe and I said, you know something? He came back.
Where's he buried?
He's buried in Amsterdam.
Okay.
In the show, by the way, I recommend everybody to go. There is a Sephardi cemetery. And this is one of the 100 cemeteries you've got to visit before you die. Okay, to visit cemetery. Yeah. So you have very interesting people there. It's an amazing cemetery. It's beautiful. And he's buried there. And now there's signed Penso de la Vega, the most famous guy in the financial markets, who was not a market player. He wrote actually the first novel in Hebrew called the Seria Tikva. Very interesting guy. So that was my background. So that's why I got into derivatives. And we created the new generation of derivatives in Bankers Trust.
Give me a hidden gem in your eyes besides for Ilfa, a hidden gem in the Gemara that you think that you want to broadcast his message.
By the way, the Gemara in Tainis, right? All these people who Rabbi Baroka goes and say, who is the Ben Olam Haba here? Meaning there are so many stories. I have to remember a story. It's so interesting. Even Meir and Bruria. Let's talk about Bruria, right? Such an amazing personnel. They're such interesting personnel instead of Nachman in Yalta. Right? Just amazing. They are different people. But again, you've got to see what part of their story really pushes you to see it. Always telling you there are so many people like that. Even the story of Abaye and Rava, meaning they're so different, Abaye and Rava. And how did they coordinate? You could read my book, because Abaye and Rava are fascinating. They are the ones who created Bavli. How did the Bavli comes about? And how Abaye comes from a Yosef, comes from a very poor family. Rava comes from a very wealthy family. And you see that they work together. This idea, the combination. That's what makes life so interesting.
And today's Rashi's yahrzeit, I believe. No?
Yes, I think so. Yes, I think so. I'm not sure.
He didn't say Tachanan this morning.
Never. Well, it's really, really interesting. I really appreciate you giving us the time.
Pleasure, and good luck in finding me a meaningful life, right?
Yeah, and finding my hero.
That's the avoid.
And finding the people, find the meaningful people from there. But the meaningful people are the ones that have a meaningful life. Right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye, guys. Thank you very much for coming. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for listening and watching this episode of the podcast. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, whether you're listening on Apple or Spotify or YouTube. You want to be notified when a new episode comes out, so hit that button. Thank you. Hope you're able to gain something from this conversation. Leave a comment. Would love to see your feedback. nachi@meaningfulminute.org. Shoot me an email. Would love to get in touch with you. Of course, Stories of Hope, another podcast under the Meaningful Minute Network, is coming out Sunday night with a new episode. Head to the Meaningful Minute YouTube channel, hit subscribe, hit the Stories of Hope with Sapporo Grudko on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and hit that follow button, hit that subscribe button, because this is going to be an amazing episode. We are so happy that we've taken on that project together with Sapporo and the Meaningful Minute team. We're so happy to present you with more meaningful Torah content, because that is what we're about. We want to create more and more for you, wherever you are in the world, whatever your religious background is. We are here for you. We're going to be creating for you. So make sure you follow us on WhatsApp, on Instagram, wherever you engage. We want to see you on there, and we want to be with you. Thank you so much. And we'll be back with another episode of the podcast next week.